Hey everyone. So yeah, thanks for giving me some of your time tonight. If you're familiar with DeepRacer, some of this will be an overview and hopefully some new information. And then if you're not familiar at all, this will all be really useful and relevant. So let's get started. So this will kind of look at what DeepRacer was and is and currently where it's at too. So who am I? My name is Darren Broderick. I live in Northern Ireland and yep, as said before, I'm a senior software developer at Liberty IT Information Technology. I'm a two-time DeepRacer finalist, but all that means is I've spent too much time with DeepRacer, um, and hopefully you will too after hearing how good it is. Yeah, and here's just like a small screenshot of the DeepRacer TV, which is a great kind of series of YouTube watch as well with Blaine Sundrin. He takes you through what it was like in 2019, going through all the different cities and winners from each race going to reInvent at the end of the year, which I was lucky enough to be a part of as a wild card through a Liberty IT event. So what we'll go through this evening is what is AWS DeepRacer. If you're not familiar with it, we'll talk through that. The reinforcement learning uses parameters and reward functions, so kind of like the nuts and bolts that put the DeepRacer model together. And a look at the new DeepRacer that came out at the end of last year or the year before, but only really got a shining light at the reInvent finals was the Evo DeepRacer. A brief look over 2019-2020, just both years being completely physical and the next year being completely all virtual, basically. The 2021 season, it just began at the start of March, so we're only at the start of it. Some new features called CAS and SAC, just some brand new that AWS have come out to try and encourage different forms of training and what they are. A demo of the console, so how you would actually start and make your model. It's really, really easy to get started, so it's something you can follow along or look at afterwards. And then it's how to get more involved. So the DeepRacer itself, it's basically AWS's solution to getting more people interested in machine learning. And it's worked on me, so I know their marketing team were on point with getting a small car with cameras that basically learns how to go around a track quickly. And we'll look at how it actually learns to do that and how effective it actually can be. But it's very easy to get started. The console kind of guides you through building your model from scratch and even gives you all the code and hyperparameters suggestions as defaults. So you can just click start and go. But it is difficult to master. It takes a long time to learn. If you're not familiar, especially with machine learning, like I was at the start, everything looks a wee bit daunting, but taking one piece at a time, which is what I'll describe, is the best way to learn, and just make one or two changes each time you want to improve an iteration and learn those in individual. And it's 99% autonomous. So for the most part, you've trained your model to go around this track, which I have a few videos of, but you can control the throttle. The throttle is just really a concept of the battery output that you want to give to the car. I can talk about what that really means as well, but the car speeds are all set by you. You just decide how much of a limit you give the battery to use those speeds. And they're all relative now, so speeds of 1 or 2 meters per second are incredibly quick. Virtually, it can handle those because things are different in the virtual world in terms of like handling gravity and friction, but in the real world, it'll be a lot more in your control, and you'll learn that if you ever race physically, that running a car at full throttle, unless your speeds are very, very slow, it's just going to go off the track immediately. So this is kind of what it's doing. So this will just play a couple of times, but this is the 2019 summit track that was used last year. Hopefully, again, you'll see it because it only got a shining light at 2019's final reInvent. And it's a lot larger and wider than the previous 2017, 2018 standard reInvent track that you'll see pretty much in all forms of like studying or defaults that the car is used to. But that's the idea. You want to keep between the white lines. The rules are if one part of a wheel is touching any of the white, it's considered in. Otherwise, the car gets reset. And generally, 3 resets is considered a lap restart. And from there, you just want to go from start to finish the quickest time that you can. And then you have a track boss, as they're called, following the car from behind us so as not to obstruct the deep lens camera in front, because what the car is looking at is the 2 border lines in the center line, and then how you've programmed that to basically respect those and try and get around the lap quickly. If you like robotics, here's the specs of the DeepRacer. Some of these are in the midst of getting updated, but this is currently what it's at for the size of scale it's on or the processor that it's on. But it's more than enough for what the car needs to do, and it can go extremely quickly, up to 4 meters per second as well. And on a battery, with maybe 1200, it's maybe about 10 to 15 minutes battery life. So it's pretty good as well. And the battery's charged quick as well. So you don't need too much more than the car and a few batteries to get going. And what this is for here, this is David Smith. So he's one of the famous AWS pit crew, and he runs AWS Underground, which I'll mention at the end. I have a video clip of them doing their thing together. But the car is actually managed. This is Sola in the top right. She's the current, or she was the 2019 champion, sorry, but she's the current physical world record holder of both existing tracks that have been raced. So she's the best in the world. But her car managed to go so quickly, it hit a wall and went backwards on the track that David had to go up and catch it. And the famous fall. So any other slide deck, you'll probably see this in it, whether it's me or him or anybody, because it's just too good not to mention. But the reason he's fallen is because he's breaking the ice with DeepRacer. The main reinforcement learning concept it's using is RL, but the other two being supervised and unsupervised. Now, if you don't know any of them, that's fine too. I didn't when I started. RL is the easier of the three. It's considered kind of gaming reinforcement language for machine learning, where supervised is something where you know the data set's labels and you want to find out more about that. And unsupervised is it's just a big bunch of data and you want the model to find interesting labels within that. And that's on the bare minimum, that's what those two are doing. But reinforcement learning is a bit more special in that it has no data to begin with. It's predefined by what you want to gather as important and store in state, and then use that to update your policy. So, but all these get you an idea, and you can start to become more confident to explore what these actually mean. And not to mention more exposure to AWS console and the CLI tools that you can use, hands-on for just either putting your stuff in S3 or pulling down more content that you can do log analysis on as well. But if you're going into the nitty-gritty of everything, the full list of SageMaker, RoboMaker, you can run this all on EC2. You can get used to Kinesis and CloudWatch for some logging events. Things that you know they exist and maybe how to use them, but you've never had maybe a reason to. These are the kind of good ways to explore. And for me as well, Jupyter Notebook, I'd never touched it before, but it basically is a really good soft introduction to data science. And the community's put together a really, really good Jupyter Notebook, which I'll mention at the end. That's kind of has all the cells, you can just run them, but because they're so broken up granularly, you can easily see what each one's doing and make your tweaks. So you can run all this on SageMaker if you want. That can be a bit expensive, but you can run locally and get a lot more hands-on with just putting all the parts together yourself. But all these are Docker imaged anyway, so you can just pull them down and run them. And then you learn more about what a neural network is and how to do something called hyperparameter optimization, which becomes really important when you know enough about what the car needs to do and what you want the car to do, but how do you train it effectively so you can get your result quicker and Avoid things like over here, overfitting is something you want to avoid the car to do physically. That really means that the car has learned too much in the virtual world and can't handle anything new and different that it'll see, which is quite common in the physical world, be it that shadows, a person following, people watching from outside the barriers. You want it to ignore all that and just focus on the track. And that's what you want to aim for, good convergence in that sense. But those are topics you learn, because if you want to be more competitive or have better times, learning that will just come naturally as a concept. So the reinforcement learning, it's really interesting. With your supervised and unsupervised beside it, what the reinforcement learning doing is another main family in the AI world. And what it's really up to is putting all these pieces together that I have on the right here. So you've got your environment, state, reward, policy, value, and your SageMaker. And what it's doing is, in the physical world, the agent or the car, it's going around and training in your simulation on a track. So this is the original track that you'll probably see everywhere, and performing all the actions, which are a set of JSON attribute values with just a speed and a steering, and it labels them from 0 to 100. And it's basically deciding whether I should use action 1 constantly on the straight, which if it's a straight angle, be it 0, that's what you would like. But it's exploring those options, wondering that if I go straight here and then go left off the track, is that a good or bad option for me? And it will send that reward and state back into SageMaker, which updates your policy and just iterates over and over that again and again, as much as you've set it to effectively. And all those feed together to be your entire model, which either you can put directly into the car or run it in the virtual league. So when the car is actually on the track, so be it virtually or physically, because both are so different, and 2019 was a mix of both. 2020 was just all virtual, and you'll probably see mostly virtual this year, but I think you'll start to see more physical stuff creep in by the end of the year and going into next year. So it's just good to kind of think of both worlds. But in your virtual world, you can go down the overfitting route. It's never going to see anything different. The virtual world that we run will be the same as what Amazon uses. But to think about it, it's still doing the same physically. It's taken all the image banks that you've given it. It's go around the track, snapping roughly 15 decisions a second, and just matching those images, what it sees in front, be it another car or just an open path or a turn, and just putting that against the neural network weight, which then matches to one of your actions. So if it sees a corner going left and it starts to pick left actions in the neural network weights, that's what you want. And the same happens physically. It's easier for it to get, in a sense, confused that it's maybe hasn't seen the type of shading, or it may be color, even though it sees in black and white, you can still get a very different shades of tone. Even slight bumps in the road, the deep lens camera is very sensitive to those kinds of things. So it's easier to try virtual first, put that into an actual car, and then see, can it go around any type of track you've made? And if you see massive differences between the two, so if your virtual times are 10 seconds, but your car can't make it around the track in 20 or 30 seconds, it's not, you might say it's not the car, it's going to be your model or something like that. What a big telltale sign is if you've maybe trained this model for maybe 100 hours on the same track over and over again, it's going to just get used to that track and nothing else. It's better to kind of give it lots of different tracks and keep the model fresh. And that's just a general concept for ML engineering as a whole. When you're giving it the same data set over and over again, and it sees a brand new line it's never seen before, it's gonna make a decision you're not gonna expect, or maybe not make a decision at all. So that's really good that you have both those options to kind of see what way your reward function or even your training has behaved in different worlds. So, but your desire is still in both situations to get a fast lap time. So either you're trying to reward it to not be distracted and get around the track the way you want as well. So the reinforcement learning terms, this is kind of broken out again just to kind of show that all of these with your reward function is what you're trying to grasp in your head and write. But when we go through the console demo, all of these together, you build your agent in the garage, you choose your track, your state action are defined with your payload of the car, and then you can decide how your reward functions. And then episode is maybe something I didn't mention before, but it's just a term for if the car has made a complete lap or it's gone off the track. That's deemed an episode in that sense. And you can set those in increments of 1 up to 100. Recommends being multiples of 5s, just to say that it's gone around the track 5 times or it's gone off 5 times. It gives the policy something to actually work with rather than being too low. So it has more experiences. So to kind of just put those together, at the start, it's, and I'll come off this because it's maybe making people dizzy, it's just exploring to begin with. When it is at the very, very start, it doesn't know what left or right is. It doesn't know it has to go around the track quickly or anything like that. It's just testing out all its actions and trying to find the limitations within those. So if you had this track here, which is the original one, if you had all left turns, it might get there, but it'll probably crash a lot, just in the sense that it'll keep resetting and keep trying to go left, but maybe it'll try to go all the slower actions to see if it can get further along. So you just want a good healthy mix of your left, right, and straights just to give it the chance to explore. And then once it explores, it starts to exploit those in the way that your rewards have been returning higher values. It will just aim for those, whether they're getting it around the track faster or slower. It just wants a higher reward. And that's what reinforcement learning is all about. Returning a single float value based on the actions that you've defined, and hopefully the reward that you want. And these are the kind of the reward function itself. It's just a Python class that you define to return the float reward value, and these are the kind of parameters that you can feed into it. So there's been a lot added since the Evo came in last year with objects, but it just gives you more opportunities to try them all, and all of these are important in their own way, depending on how you want to use them. A lot of people will look at the default values, that one that have maybe all wheels on track or is crashed for the objects, just to give it exact state results back that you know it's hit an object or it's gone off track or all wheels are still on track, to keep rewarding it for those kind of situations. But yeah, there's plenty there, so you're not stuck for choice. And I have 3 examples to show you of reward functions as well. And the console will give us 5, I believe, of different scenarios, 3 for time trial, 1 for object, and 1 for head-to-head racing against multiple cars. But this is the most famous one. It's started, one everyone probably started on, that's defaulted. It's rewarding the center line. And just to kind of explain it, because if you're not familiar with Python or anything, it would be unfair to assume. The params I mentioned before, track width and distance from center, are used here. And all it's done is set up in terms of markers, just distances of multiplications from the track width. So if it was 1 meter, it would be multiplying that by these factors and then just rewarding the car more if it was closer to the actual center line. And that's that one in a nutshell. And that's a complete reward function that's quite effective to start with, because the car will not go as risky to the sides and go off. So you can try out a new action set maybe with something like this to see, can the car even stay in the center? And things like this are easy to understand as well to start with from a point of view. You can go as what's called a bit more hands-off approach. So the idea here is that the car could be able to explore more of the track than you could. And again, I have a counter argument to that in the next one. But the point here is that the car, again, is all wheels are on track, and its steps, which is an important parameter, which a step is a single action each time it takes. And you just want to see, has it started making those steps? And then you just want to base on how far it's made it in terms of progress, which is the third parameter here, over the steps. So how much progress is it making per step? And that's just a simple way to understand if it's making more progress with every single action, then that's what you want to give it a higher reward. And then as a bonus, this one's just adding on your speed. So you're trying to incentivize to go into picking the faster actions that you have there. Otherwise, return just this standard 0.01 reward. It's nothing against returning 0 or negative. It's very dependent on different point of views that somehow a 0 or negative reward could negatively impact the car in coming off the track a lot sooner before it had a chance to lose a reward it had. To kind of explain that, if it got from the point it started here to the corner, if it stayed on and got a result of 50, it would be better to take that 50 in the car's mind than it would to try and risk this corner and coming off and losing it all. And that's what the risk with something like that reward function is. The car may very well learn how to take that corner, depending on the actions you've given it, or it may not. But it's definitely something to explore. I think it's worth seeing what progress and steps can give you. The counter argument to that is to assume the car knows nothing and you know far better than it. You just tell it all the waypoints, which is another really important parameter. I don't have a diagram of it. I think I maybe do later on about log analysis. Waypoints are just single index values counted from 0 all the way around the track until it gets to the end. So 0 to maybe 180, for example. And you're just telling it that I know you want to be on the left-hand side, coming up to a corner, on the right-hand side, come up to the next. And then for straights, I want you to be at these waypoints in the center. And all you're doing it there is telling it to be as such. And instead of giving it percentage-based values, you're just giving it straight ints, and then just returning that as a float anyway. But there's nothing wrong with this either. It's definitely something that you'll see results with because you have kind of just driven out the path, and it will learn to go that path if it's able to. But between the three, there's definitely something for everybody to start. I would always recommend this one because it will be obvious after a few hours. The car is trying to keep to the center line. It may be wavy, but it is trying its best. So the hyperparameters, once you've done all that, there's only one more step to think about. And this is probably the trickiest part to understand, because each one of these has such a massive impact on training that each time you explain another one, it almost seems more important than the last. But very, very briefly, between your batch, epochs, learning rate, I would happily leave those as defaulted to start with. I would never ever change entropy. It's basically, and maybe some people find out good ways too, but it is the randomness of how often the car is actually exploring its actions. So a change in that value, and these are just the defaults that AWS have provided. The change in that value can drastically reflect on how often the car is trying out different actions at random. But if it's doing it too randomly, then it'll never get a chance to actually explore your reward function in the way that you mean it to. Your epochs is how many iterations it will go over, and your batch size is how much information it has to draw from based on how many episodes you have the car go round. So 20 here is 20 complete laps, or 20 times the car has gone off a track or hit an object. Out of those 20, how much value am I exposing to the weights and how many times am I going over them, updating them. And then the learning rate is how quickly or slowly I'm going to learn in doing so. As a basics, that's what those are. The last type, I've tried both. They're both great. I think main is better if you've got issues with convergence, or if you're happier with convergence. If you're more confident, your car will learn because your reward is simple. But between the two, it's fine to choose either. And your discount factor is kind of a point of view of how many steps ahead the car is seeing. 999, I think, is 1,000. Yes. So that's quite an awful lot. I would reduce that, take off a 9 of one of those 9s to start with, just to, it doesn't need to see more steps than what the track even has. So I would try that with the defaults anyway as well. And kind of like a good point of view is if you ever want to explore changing something, I would really only change either your actions once, your reward function once, or any of these just once, because if you start to change too many and it's good or bad, it's really hard to identify what was the root cause of that without just going backwards, and then you've just tried to catch up on yourself and you've maybe wasted some time. So yeah, it kind of becomes a bit messy in your head, but that's why I would recommend just sticking defaults to begin with and changing one area at a time, because between your reward function, your action spaces, the track you choose, whether you're thinking virtually or physically, and then your hyperparameters, the kind of training process that you want to go through, it's going to be very difficult to try all of those different things, changing them all at once, all the time. There's nothing better than just doing one thing at a time. And that's not a guarantee, though, that if you up your batch, that your training gets better. It technically should, because it's providing more experiences or more weights. But it just gives you a chance to learn each piece individually, I think, and just be a wee bit more cautious. I'll explain why it's important to be cautious as well, just because of the nature of the training. Yeah, and just to kind of reiterate, if you train the model in the virtual world in one track, it's you can very easily overfit it for your physical track, and it's really worth seeing an overfitted model to appreciate what it took to get there, because you can see the things the car is trying to do physically that it would do virtually, but it's just either making the decisions too late or not at all, or really struggling to even come off the starting line because it's unsure. Not all the time. Sometimes it maybe is just the car, so it's worth checking things like calibration and battery, but those are usually the suspects. Yep, and then train on different tracks as well is a good way just to keep a good general model for the real world too. So yeah, finally there's log analysis, which kind of said I would talk about the waypoints. That's kind of in there on the far right, is different locations of XY values considered to be a waypoint. I think the original track has around 71 waypoints, so 71 steps could be done to get around the track in that sense. But the log analysis done by the community is great. It's got iteration paths, heat maps. This one works for the original track, but it's not as, it's a bit more redundant, but it was good to show the potential that it was for the original track, because that was the main focus for the entire starting year of DeepRacer. In a sense, it only had one track, which seems like a long time ago now that it has maybe 20. But the log analysis is definitely where you want to go to after you've seen either improvements or trying to find the root cause of something that you think should work, or it's worked for another model, and it will give you a lot of information back from the RoboMaker and SageMaker, but that could be a whole other talk. And there's really, really good guides that are provided by the community for just running each of those cells. You don't even have to think, you just follow the instructions and just click run by cell. But And I'll talk about the DeepRacer or the Evo, sorry, in a second, but this is kind of what gets you your hand-on experience with reinforcement learning. So you come out of this maybe thinking you know how to race a car on the track, but you've already learned a lot of really good concepts that maybe your employer or future employers would find quite desirable, in the sense that you now can speak to a lot of different main machine learning areas that everybody will be using, or at least understands more about neural networking and designing models, which all of this is still related to. And I think that's why it's continuing to be popular as well, because it's such a hot topic, machine learning, that it's not going to go away, and it's things like this are going to become more common. So the Evo came out, and it's interesting because it's the same car exactly. It's just got a second deep lens camera on the front of it. So the front of the car has 3 USB slots. You just take your middle one out and then pop 2 in. And the stereo is giving it a sense of depth analysis, so it can actually see the distance and understand the distance between objects, rather than just static points that it sees as it runs up to them. And then the LiDAR is a 360 spinning camera, but really it's only getting 270 vision because the kind of case covers a wee bit of it, but it's mainly to see behind it. And the idea there is not to get around objects, because you're already past them with your second camera, but it's to try and cut off other cars that are racing, or cutting inside of you, and you're trying to maybe block their lane and that such. But that's what it has. It constantly spins, so it will drain your battery a bit quicker, but together they're an interesting pair that hopefully we'll see being used physically, maybe end of this year or next year. But I'll talk about the underground guys as well. They run models like this too, so it's worth, once you're more familiar with a single camera, exploring both. But I'll also show how you design those in the garage as well. So the DeepRacer League in 2019, 2020 was very, very different in the sense of it being completely physical, and this is the DeepRacer TV, which is really worth watching if you don't know any of these people. It's exciting watching who wins, because throughout the day it's just loads and loads of developers lined up, and everybody's looking to get a chance to get on the scoreboard. And the winner gets a free reInvent pass and a chance at the championship, and a jacket and trophies and all. So it's very exciting, and they're well viewed, and they, from the beginner point of view, they explain a lot of concepts that Blaine goes through as each different racer talks about what they try to focus on to make their model better than others. So get you into the mindset of what other people have tried and if it worked or not. But we were lucky enough to go, this was my team, so we won a wild card ticket together, and we were called Outrun. And I was the racer force, and we went over to the 2019 championships, very unheard of because we didn't feature in the main league. We were partners with AWS, and we ran an in-house company event. But that in-house company event was very challenging. It had 64 teams, and it was funny that the championships also had 64 teams, and it was just winner takes all. So it was just broken into brackets throughout months, and our models were ran physically. We just had to watch through webcam. So we were lucky enough to be able to go over for the final part of it, for the top 8, and we were able to clinch a win there. It was really down to the last 30 seconds, which I wished would have been decided a bit sooner. My heart couldn't take it. But this is what you got to go to. So this was the arena set up for the finals, and each of these tracks were called after a different AWS service. And the bottom right one was left for open play and to show off the concept of like the Evos that were coming out as well. But the rest were for the 64 champions to break up into groups, and then group brackets, and then the head-to-heads, which were in the sense that it was one racer races and gets their time, and then it's up to the racer 2 to beat it. And if not, then that racer goes through in a head-to-head bracket until there's 3 remaining, and then they raced on stage. We were doing quite well. throughout time trials and practices, and we thought we were in a good position, but we didn't win it overall. So unfortunately, we got to race against Fuminaki, who won second, and he put us out in the last bracket, but his model was very, very impressive. So that's when they started bringing a lot more stats, given each racer and each model a percentage likelihood chance of winning based on how many laps you were doing and how consistent you were. So even then, people were starting to think more about being fast is good, but staying on the track for more laps is actually better for your chances. So 2019 came and went, and then 2020 introduced the concept that it was going to be more virtual, but there were going to be more races and opportunities to win. So very much the way 2021 now is going, there's 3 races per month. This is how it worked last year. It's a tiny bit different this year, and I'll show you that as well. Winner of each one of these won a ticket, and it went backwards. So head-to-head played out, the top 32 raced off against each other in the virtual sense. And then the winner of that was taken out, and then the objects and then the time trials. But it got very competitive, and they were able to give it more tickets because of the summits they weren't able to race as well. So a lot of new people got to go and experiment against the pros. So you got a good mix as well. And this is what it looked like. So if you were able to make it so far and you got to, this was last year, if you got to the object one, this is just a very short video to show that AWS tried to do everything they could to make it as big an event as possible, even if it was virtually. So they brought Ryan back, who was a sports presenter from last year, and they live Twitch streamed it. And I had to race this live with controls of using a mouse clicker that's just below, turning my speed up and down. So I'll play this very briefly.
Barely missed the cut to make it into the final 3 last year. And keep in mind, he was one of the wild card entries at reInvent.
So they called this one the Box of Doom, which you've maybe seen t-shirts of. But it was
staff members at partner organizations. He's from Liberty Mutual. I think at first just a little bit curious with what was going on, but then they saw what this was all about. They saw DBro, they saw Darren and his success, and they got all behind it. And right now, DBro would make it through to the round of 32. That first lap, a strong.
And although it sounds good, I didn't make it through. 2 more racers came, and I was 5th in that one. But that's kind of what we think the rest of this year is going to go. If you make it so far into a top area, you'll race it live, and even that's fun in itself because it gives you a new challenge, and there's a lot more to process there when it comes to doing your boxes and kind of like your strategy for racing as well. I'm not gonna play it again. But the 21 season, so it began the 1st of March, and it has now got open and pro divisions. So for anyone who's interested now, it's not that you have to win against people who have been doing this for 2 years now. There's 1 ticket per open race and 2 per pro. So if you were to go and look at the March now, you'd see this on the right, that 703 beginners are trying to race for a single ticket, whereas 52 pros are trying to race for 2. At the end of this month, the top 10% of the open will go into the pro, and then that will release opportunity for more beginners to try their hand as well. So really, really good odds there. Like, you may look at those numbers, but like maybe they'll go up with popularity, but the biggest competition will get pushed into the pro, and likely we'll see this probably be 150 next month, and then that will just get harder for us and easier for the open. So it should balance quite nicely if it's easier for the pros at the start, in the sense that there's already a lot of good pros that are expected to get tickets initially anyway. I think it's really fair for them to do something like that, so no one just wants to start, see that they've no chance against people who know all there is to know already and would give up, when the idea is to explore this, to learn about machine learning, not to give up straight away. So yeah, that's the idea there. And the race types will differ each month, though I think the open will just always be time trial. I think that would be the first. Whereas the pros will look at doing head to head and objects and mixing and matching those. And maybe a Grand Prix fashion, which they've done before, which is just 8 people race at once, which is absolute mayhem, but they can do it because they've got enough memory to run it. And little bonuses are probably for most people who race, or if you get a certain high number, but these will be easy to get because they're just virtual skins, but they just make your car look a bit more blingy to run on the track. And there's no advantage, even though it's a Formula One car versus like this big boxy thing. Its object dimensions are the same, I believe, but it's still cool to run. Just gives you something to race for. So yeah, two new things that came in, and I just want to mention these because there's already so much stuff that's considered new if you begin this that you might end up choosing these without understanding, and they're very, very different to what already exist. And all the promises I'm making, I'll show these as well in the console demo. But the continuous action space, it's something we were excited about. Unfortunately, it just hasn't beaten the original action space, which is called discrete, which is a set of values you set yourself. The idea here is that the car is given an infinite amount of actions to choose from, and it will define out the best steering and speeds based on the reward function that you've set. It does work. It can get around the track, but people have found it just can't be as fast as actions you've set for it. So just worth trying if you want, but it's better, I think, to start with discrete, which is, I'll show both, but I think it's better to start with the default for discrete. And then this other one is the SAC, which is just a latest training algorithm. So the other one is PPO. Luckily, these aren't set as default, so you can't accidentally choose them. But the same situation there. People have tried SAC with discrete action spaces and just found it not to be as effective as PPO. They both work. They're just maybe not. Maybe we even find the right use cases for them, or there's maybe still some improvements, or maybe they'll just never be as good. But that's just currently the case. And I just I would hate to recommend them without them being fully tested yet, but they're there and you could choose them. Oh, it's time for the demo. So yeah, I'm going to go into the console, and I should have said this at the start. If there's any questions at any point as well, fire away. But I'm going to show just kind of all the ins and outs of what you would need to do to make your model. And I had a few warnings. It is expensive. So if you're running on free tier, or if you never used DeepRacer before, your first 10 hours are free. I remember that sounded like a lot, but it's not. 10 hours could go disappear in a day or 2 days if you're trying out multiple models, which is another thing you can do. You can set up more than one. And it's $3.50 per hour after that, so that gets very expensive very quickly. So, but that's not doom and gloom. It's worth just seeing how the console works. But it adds up fast, and it's just something to keep your costs on. So you can set up watch alerts to stop that. But the best solution there is to find the guides that are part of the DeepRacer community, how to run these locally, either on your own desktop or through something on the cloud side, which is what I do on EC2. So let's switch out. Okay, so actually I'll show from the start, sorry. Yeah, if you're just in the main console and you search for DeepRacer, and then we go into that, there's a lot of really good documentation as well, I would recommend, and I'll show that afterwards too. The Get Started guide, it's really good. But all you need to do to start with is go to your garage and go to your models. So the garage is just where you make your car. It's something new that came out, but you're able to set up different types of cars, which are quite useful. So you can either build a new one or mod one you already have. but this is where you'll choose either your single camera stereo or your LiDAR. It's whether you make it into an Evo or not, but I would definitely recommend starting with camera. And although it lets you do this, I would never choose camera with LiDAR. You might as well choose stereo. It's what it's meant to be, to work in conjunction, but single camera there, all the same. And then it looks like it has actually maybe defaulted continuous. I would actually switch that back to discrete. Continuous is the one I mentioned where you just set a high and low maximum, and then everything inside that is infinite in a sense. So you can set this as low as, well, it's 0.5 the lowest there. But you can set this up to 4. So angles between 30 and minus 30, so you have 60 there, and then you have pretty much unlimited combinations between 0.5 and 4 for each types of angle. Something like that would probably take 100 hours to get anywhere. Even if it did, it might choose so many too many actions that are too fast, it might never get around. So I would definitely start discrete. It's what I use. And you can choose these types of speed granularities and steering. They're just there in a sense to build up an action list and do divisions on your speed or your angles. It's it would be, in my mind, it would have been simpler if they just let you choose your action number, but this is how they let you control it in the console. So something like 9 would be really smart. A speed of 1, yeah, like this will be slow, but it won't be taxing for the model to experiment with, because the faster it goes, the less time it has to make a decision, and it's harder for it to fully explore what you want it to do. So yeah, something like that would be a great place to start, and you can name it whatever you want. And then once you have your vehicle, you just need to go into your models, and you'll likely maybe start with a couple of defaults, but you could ignore them or have a look, but they'll be the same as what we're going to create here. Just give it a model name as well. So then here's just kind of like what I was talking about with the state and reward diagrams, but very simple. All you need to do is give it a name, choose a track. I didn't realize the time, sorry. Choose a track really quickly. Your PPO and your stack, I would stick with PPO and choose your test. And here's where you can choose your hyperparameters. Again, keeping this defaults, maybe take off something that's only looking at 100 actions, or you can leave it there just to see. But I would never go that high anymore after experimenting. So I would save your time there. And all of that's pretty good to begin with, to be honest. And you just click next, and here's your reward function I shown as well. You can choose to send it to the model or the evaluator, but here's all your different actions or reward functions, sorry. For follow the line, stand inside the borders, or prevent zigzag. It's quite a good one as well, because it does what centerline does, but kind of capitalizes on a extra steering threshold and stops things going too high or low. And yeah, that's it there. You just click create model and you're done, and it'll give you 1 hour, 5 minutes to spin up, 10 minutes to spin down. So add on extra 15 minutes before you're actually able to use it. And just to finish off, yeah, I would recommend reading the Get Started guide and this guy. It goes through really nice explanation of what I kind of talked about, but has really good visual aids for showing. This one here is really good, really explains how rewards work for the cars like actions. So that's everything. Tiny quick plug for Underground. That's David, that's John. He runs it in his basement. They have good crack, and hopefully they're going to start again in April. So if you join the community, you'll definitely see them in the main channel announce their races. All you do is email them their model, and they'll run it in the car for you. And sometimes there's credits to win, but mostly it's just good fun. And that is me. If you want to get more involved, don't worry about the time. That's just from something else. I just really like this picture. Yeah, join the DeepRacer community. There's quite a few admins that will accept your request straight away. And if you want to read another doc, there's this one, but the one I recommend, it's brilliant. And yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't realize that was an hour. I guess we started at 5 past though, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. Any questions for Darren?
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. No, thank you, everyone. Questions are hard to come by in this because it's hard to know where to start. Really, just if you're interested, join in that DeepRacer Slack channel. You can post any single question you want. Likely, someone like me will answer you pretty quickly. Even if it's just where should I start again. We're more than happy to provide help there.